people will appreciate that you are organized, that it's clear, that they don't have to run after you. And so many times I have been told, oh, thank you, this was really good. It's a relief to me to be receiving an organized file.
Yeah, everything at once.
Right. And that's the way I feel when I open a client's file and everything is organized, right? I'm happy to then be able to bring them tax information, tax advice, tax planning, and
build value quickly instead of having to chase each document.
Right.
Hello, and welcome back to the Very Real Estate Effect podcast, a show dedicated to real estate investing right here in Quebec and really in all of Canada. So today, I am very pleased and honored to have Rosalie-Anne Mandich, tax lawyer, international tax lawyer, on the show. And we're going to be talking about taxes, getting ready for taxes, tax filings, financial statements, and all of this. But before we go any further, this is a really important episode for you to get organized. And you know people around you who are not very organized with their taxes, their documentations to prepare financial statements. There's going to be golden nuggets. Share this episode with a friend who could benefit from this conversation. Like, subscribe, send us some comments and some feedback. We always appreciate it. And I try to respond to everything we get. So here we go. Rosalie, first of all, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, in preparation for this episode, we had said like a question that we get often is also is taxes. Is the financials is a huge area for a lot of people out there who may not be very organized, and so you had suggested that we help them.
Right. So I want to help you save money on fees, and I also want to help you get your sanity back and a lot of time back in your schedule because there's such leakage when it comes to tax and finances. It's kind of like, I hate to say this, but like going to the dentist. Not many people are excited in the morning when they wake up and they have that on their to-do. But it's something that we do need to do. And if you do it right, then it might, really help you along the way.
Yeah.
So the first thing I've noticed in my practice that I want to share with all our listeners is that be organized. Be organized so that when you go and see your accountant, tax specialist, lawyer, whomever you're dealing, even a mortgage broker, whomever, you can find your documents quickly. You have, a clear ask and clear facts to show the person who is helping you out. Okay. If there's like back and forth emails, calls, and after an hour of a call that you're paying for,
at the big bucks rate.
Exactly. It's still not clear to your professional advisor, what the facts are, and you still have an information list that you have to go through. There's a problem. Okay. So I like to say, be organized and gather all of that before you go see the professional.
Okay. And I want to dig a little bit further. Like when you say be organized when you communicate with them, because you have some documents, a lot of stuff is in your head. Like, can you be a little bit more granular and specific? But what can people put in place on daily, weekly, monthly basis to be organized with their paperwork?
Okay. Absolutely. So a few tips. I like to say that, most of us do our filing systems on the computer. But if you do it paper, it works just the same way. Have a folder with subfolders. And in each subfolder, you'll have, let's say you're doing business with a corporation. So you'll have a folder that says incorporation. So you have all your incorporation documentation there. Okay. If you have the corporation's first year, you probably have all the financials for that. So a subfolder with invoices, income, expenses. Okay. You're probably doing it on Excel, or maybe you have a system like QuickBooks that you're using with your accountant. That's great. But just have a backup for everything and sort it in the right spot. If you need to look for it more than like 12 seconds, there's a problem. Have another folder with tax returns. Okay. Have another folder with notices of assessment. Have a folder with, there's so much of it, all the documents that the tax authorities, Revenu Québec, will send you here in Quebec for your sales tax returns that you have to file.
All the previous communications.
Right. And some people will say, I don't have anything paper, it's all online. Perfect. But sometimes it's good to keep track of it. Like they definitely sent you something by mail at one point. Passwords. And I know because I've had to do it myself. It drives me crazy. I don't know which password it is anymore, which website, which, login page. And I end up losing a lot of time. So if you just notice that this is something that you need help with or that you lose time on, write a short step memo. Like it's 2 lines. Go to this webpage, you put the link, enter this password, enter this username, and boom, that's it. So that on a monthly basis, when you need to have access to that information, it's quick and readily available.
Yeah. And I could really see from your perspective, having dealt with hundreds of files and of clients, how important it is to be organized for the time it saves you. And because you're charging your time back to the client. So the more the client is organized, the faster it goes. And the I don't want to say the cheaper, but the less of a bigger bill does he get. Now,
can I just
of course
react to that? Absolutely. And what I notice is that people come to me for the expertise I can bring. And if really I need to charge my time because I'm sorting through your info, then I don't feel like I'm bringing you value.
No.
And I would understand that you don't feel excited to be paying that invoice. Yet I do have to charge for my time. And that would be the case for any other professional, right? So the more you can bring things that are organized, it will help you save on costs, and it will help you and your professional advisor focus on the conversations that are value add to you, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so then what else can you advise on in terms, so you mentioned first, be organized with your documentation. What else is there? Okay,
so tax is a very much fact-based science, right? If we can call it science. Maybe it's an art. And so you need to have your facts straight. And the first thing, because depending on what the structure is, what type of investment, what type of income, et cetera, the tax rules that will apply might differ. So you really need to come with a full picture that you can provide to your advisor. And that will often look like, remember the family trees we used to do when we were kids?
Yeah, of course.
Right. And then that you suddenly want to do again when you're 40 and you want to...
You mean a fancy corporate structure?
You do exactly that. No. Okay. So you will draw yourself at the top, and then you'll draw all the corporations or the other vehicles, investment vehicles that you might have. And then you also, what I like to do, I'm giving you all my tips. As a professional, when I receive the file, or if I'm working on that file, what I like to see is on each corporation, where are they incorporated? Which country or which province, if it's in Canada, when, the date of incorporation, the year end, because filing deadlines will depend on the year end, right? And what else? Shareholders. Tax residency of the shareholders. Where do they live? Okay, where do they file their taxes? Because depending on that, you might have a Canadian-controlled company or a foreign-controlled company. And it can very quickly go from one to the other, and then oops, and then you have a slew of tax consequences that go with that. Okay, if you add in a shareholder, whoops, you might have had a disposition, a sale. Okay, so you want to keep track of that. And it might be very clear to you from one day to the next and from 1 month to the next. But then all of a sudden, you're caught up with your business, which is a good thing. But then you'll have to be able to provide that information, not only to save time, but to determine what the tax consequences are and maybe how to structure your business better.
Yeah.
So if you want to be able to go to the next step and have a value add conversations, have all of that ready.
Have the facts straight, as you said.
Exactly.
That's a really good point.
And then you don't end up, because that happens too, a whole, mandate will be spent planning something, and then you realize, oh, but there was a missing fact, and it changes everything. the planning doesn't work anymore, right? Or we should have added extra steps, or we should have done it differently, just so that it can actually work.
Yeah. So what you're saying is it's important for you as the professional to, as quickly as possible, get all the corresponding document and get an accurate picture of what the situation is, I guess, and their desired outcome, because they come to you for, especially if you're doing a tax planning, they're looking for a certain outcome within a certain amount of time.
Right.
So is that what you mean by getting all the facts straight?
Absolutely. And making them very clear from the beginning. And those that we're not sure of, that's okay. We can focus on those, go get the right answers. But a planning will depend on the facts, right? And your tax advisor will help you and guide you with the tax planning. And your role is really to be focused on the business. So in order for the tax advisor to help you, then they really need all of those facts.
Yeah, makes sense.
And those facts might change from one year to another, but at least you understand. And if listeners have ever had to deal with that, like a planning memo, for example, from the beginning to the end of the transaction, you always go back and check the facts. Now, there's one thing that's really cool, is if you bring all of them to your advisor right from the get-go.
Yeah.
And we were just discussing before geometry for tax.
What does that mean, geometry for tax?
Geometry for tax. So that's a really cool one. It's, how we were taught geometry and we're like, when is this ever going to be useful? Well, so the fun of it is it can be very helpful for you when you do your corporate structure. So you're at the top in the drawing. And the other thing is some people place themselves at the bottom. And so the tree is a bit messed up. But the geometry for tax will be, well, a corporation is always drawn as a rectangle. Okay. And a partnership will be an oval. And a trust can be, in certain jurisdictions, a triangle. And so when you use this coding, it's very clear to the tax professional, the accountant, which in all firms, and across the board, even lawyers, it will be very clear to them what they're dealing with. So it's just one way to convey information.
Okay.
And make it easy to read for all.
And so this tax geometry to draw the corporate structure and all of its stakeholders, that goes into get the facts straight, right?
Well, exactly. And understanding your structure.
Okay.
And when you think of it, tax is really simple. It's very straightforward. And there's a rule for each scenario and for each structure. And to a lot of people, tax is so strange and blurry and mysterious.
Yeah, I was going to say mysterious. Mysterious, yeah. And it's not unknown or foreign. It's just hard to understand. There's such an aura around taxes. It's weird.
Right. And I could go on and talk for like hours about partnerships or corporations, but it's not tangible to many of us, right? So if you put it down and you draw it as a rectangle, you draw it as an oval, the drawing will start speaking to you. You will understand why certain entities are flow-throughs. Others, like corporations, are taxed as a different entity, as a legal person, right? So I'm just trying to give you tips on how to organize your file, have a better understanding, a better grasp of your situation, your structure. That will help you go get funds, attract investors, not spend your fees on
explaining to a tax lawyer
on paperwork, but actually planning, structuring.
I really like what you said about how just being organized and getting all of your facts straight actually obviously helps in working in tax and with your accountant, but also with banks and anyone who's done a financing. It's always the same list of documents. You might as well have it in a Google Drive or Dropbox or whatever, so you can share that. And obviously all those documents need to be relevant and of the proper year. like, the notice of assessment, it has to be
Folder per
this year, a folder per year. But I find also like they need to be properly labeled. Like I hate it when people send me a whole file, there's documents, and then some of them are like just a list of numbers when it doesn't mean anything. Just call it a certificate of location if it's a certificate of location. Anyways, going back to what you were mentioning about the be organized, get your facts straight. What other tip can you share with our listeners in terms of making this whole process a little bit easier?
Another leakage is when the information trickles in. So you have a first discovery call with the client. They explain the situation or they explain what they're looking for, and you come back to them and say, "Okay, well, I need this information," and then you just never hear back.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's okay. Life is not about being, on a clock all the time. Business gets in the way of schedules, and you're busy with something else. But then months go by, and guess what? When you do touch point with your advisor again, they've probably forgotten some of the information. Yes, they took notes, but maybe some of it isn't even relevant anymore. So you have to go through it again. And then each time you go over things that you've already done or started but not finished, you end up spending, time, which is billable hours, and will end up on an invoice. So yes, you can deduct it, but is that, the best use of your funds when running a business?
Interesting.
So, and once again, it's not just about, of course, I'm talking from a tax perspective, but this will be helpful to you when you deal with the bankers, when you deal with investors. You want to attract capital. And the other thing is people will appreciate that you are organized, that it's clear, that they don't have to run after you. And so many times I have been told, "Oh, thank you. This was really good. It's a relief to me to be receiving an organized file."
Yeah, everything at once.
Right. And that's the way I feel when I open a client's file and everything is organized, right? I'm happy to then be able to bring them tax information, tax advice, tax planning, and
build value quickly instead of having to chase each document.
Right.
You're completely right. And I guess that goes for a lot of the things that we do in real estate, where in the end it's a people business. We have to correspond with a lot of outside members, and we need to be organized in how we do this.
Right. And, I get it. It's not much fun. We'd rather be thinking about, the plans and prospecting and, renos but it's a mal nécessaire. And if you put it in your calendar and you put an alarm, you set an alarm every quarter, and you're like, okay, I sit down and I organize my invoices, my whatever system you have, a shoebox, and you go through that and you do your filings on time, because not doing your filings or pretending you didn't receive, letters from the CRA does not help. It means you just have a pile to go through later on instead of one envelope, right?
As you mentioned that, it reminds me of some of the process that we've gone through when we need to prepare financial statements and for taxes, is also like to take last year's financial statements, compare them to the preliminary of this year, and to say, have we included all of the expenses? Because once in a while you miss something. Or I'm just even thinking of I think our first year, we didn't know that our CMHC premium was something that we could include. And so the importance of just taking last year's versus this year's and comparing and thinking back throughout the whole year. Okay, I was supposed to pay for, this roof was $15K. Do I have $15K's worth of invoices in my system right now? Right. And doing all those verification property by property, job by job is absolutely crucial.
Right. It'll jog your memory. It's a good way to make sure you don't forget anything. Hey, listen, I'm sure everyone has cleaned up their desk one day and realized, oh my goodness, these are invoices for last year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. Too late. I cannot include them on my tax return unless I amend, right? And so for $20, $100 here and there, you won't necessarily amend, but those were expenses you were entitled to. So that's another leakage point, right? And by the way, I'd like to bounce on that comment and just open a parenthesis. Be careful who you get tax and accounting advice from or legal advice, because I have heard of, coaching in real estate with sessions that recommend as a strategy in order to get financing to not include certain expenses on your tax return. So I'll explain.
Oh, to bump up.
So I'll explain it in like very simply put. It's you want to show whoever's going to be lending you money that you have a high income, right? Because the mortgage is based on your income capacity in certain cases. So what they're saying is file your tax return, because they always ask a copy of your tax return and your notice of assessment. File a tax return with only the income, not the expenses.
That's crazy.
That way your income is full, right? And then after you've gone through your financing and obtained your mortgage, then you go and amend your tax return and claim all the expenses.
That's not a good idea at all.
Well, isn't it?
No, that's a terrible idea.
Right, because all you're doing, aside from adding extra paperwork, is really raising a red flag and inviting the tax authorities to come and audit you.
Major red flag.
What is this? No expenses, all of a sudden all these expenses? What's going on?
But in terms of the timeline, I would expect that then crazy people using the strategy would say file, and then as soon as you file, you can print the PDF and just say that that's what you've used, and you could amend the next day. You don't need to wait for your financing to go through, because depending on the time of the year, your financing versus doing your taxes, it may not match.
Depending, but they also often ask for they always ask for the notice of assessment. So if it's the current year, and you could technically argue that but I mean, don't go there.
Don't go there. That's that's a bad idea.
Because there's no point. Do you know how much it costs in time and energy and stress to go through an audit? And
I guess what it proves is be careful where you get your education information from.
And advice.
Yeah. You mean not from the taxi driver?
Well, but or someone who's really good at, I don't know, foundations, building foundations or brickwork or installing a kitchen. Don't ask them for tax advice.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Who you get your information from. Whoa, those are all really good points. Thank you for bringing this to our attention.
So as you close your year end and open a new year, just make sure you go through your paperwork, have all your expenses aligned, all your income, prepare a org chart to show your structure and have a clear understanding of your structure, and see what you can do differently this year to be more organized on a progressive, day-to-day basis, and not have to do all that catch-up work. And then we can have a tax conversation.
I like that a lot, actually. I find it's always very interesting, and I get a lot of value from this. So really hope our listeners are listening as well.
So what I'd like to invite the listeners to do is reach out if they have any tax questions or questions about, how to organize a file, how to be prepared, help them save money. I'm happy to do that as well.
And what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So Rosalie@realestateeffect.ca. And you can reach out by email, and we can have a call.
Yeah, and we'll make sure to put your email address in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for the value that you build for our listeners. And we will do more and more episodes like this in the future. So I look forward to having you back on.
Thank you.
For all those who are listening, there's some golden nuggets on how you can just take a few habits, be a little bit more organized, and greatly benefit for it for the long time in the future. So make sure that you actually implement those strategies mentioned by Rosalie, and that you shared this episode with a friend who could be more organized as well, because we all know someone who's drowning in paperwork and running a real estate business or another business out of a shoebox, and it's really, really not recommended nowadays. So thank you very much. As usual, research your market, make some offers. I'll talk to you next week. Thank you.